So about me, there should be some more text here, but I will tell it in words. So I work as Agile coach for Luxoft company, probably some of you knows it already. And also I'm doing Agile transformations of projects and programs. I work in IT for 13 years, and mostly I was a project manager and program manager, but now I'm working for 3 years as an Agile coach, and I'm really like this job. Today we are going to talk about product backlog facilitation sessions, and here is the agenda. First of all, I will say a few words about facilitation, and also about product backlog refinement meetings. Who of you have these meetings on projects, like product backlog refinements? So you're pretty much familiar with these. Okay, and who is using facilitation techniques to get more involvement of the team members? Pretty few, but still. A few words in general about product backlog refinement meetings. So it is meetings where we, together with the team, together with Scrum team, we all like product manager, product owner, Scrum master, and developers, we investigate requirements in order to understand it better and in order to provide more expected result at the end. We have, and we can have several product backlog meetings during the sprint. It can be 1 meeting, it can be 4 meetings, it can be 5 meetings. We would like to have our backlog relevant and updated. It is the main idea behind the product backlog refinement meetings. During product backlog refinement meetings, we look through our product backlog, use some facilitation techniques to understand it better, to explore it better. Probably we're updating some items, we're deleting some items, we're adding some new items, so we work with these in order at the end we will be able to create, for instance, on planning meeting, our sprint backlog. And about facilitation in general. So this was the part about product backlog in general stuff and about facilitation in general, because I would like to set some frame for our discussion. And about facilitation. So when you do a facilitation, is actually you create the environment. It's like boxes where you put the people and activities into, and in such a way you make a flow of a meeting. So here is some meeting agenda. So you can start with warm-up, then do brainwriting to gather ideas, then you can have World Coffee technique to explore ideas. You can vote for ideas using Five and Feast. You can also do pro-con analysis of ideas, and after this you can create meetings of the meeting. So sometimes you can use all these boxes for your meeting to facilitate each state of the meeting. But sometimes you just can use some facilitation techniques at the middle, at the beginning, at the end. It's up to you. So you don't need to use all the time, use different facilitation techniques in one meeting, because when I'm conducting trainings for facilitations, I'm providing people like 50, 60 techniques, and they think that they need to go to meetings and start use all of them. No, it's just your set of instruments. Facilitation in general is mostly about being neutrally engaged and is also about process ownership. As a facilitator, you don't bring any input to the meeting and you don't take anything out of the meeting as information. So you own the process, not the content. It is the main idea about facilitation. So you're process owner when you're acting as a facilitator. That is why you need to create this flow with boxes and to put people and activities into it. And not to bring something. You can't, and also you can't judge or evaluate of ideas of some people. If somebody is telling you that these requirements is not understandable for them, you can't say, guys, you're talking nonsense. This requirements is clear for everybody. So you don't bring in your evaluation as well. And you don't bring any information into the meeting. But most of us, I think, work as partially as facilitators on our meetings and partially as someone else, like product owner or Scrum Master or development team members. So you need to understand for yourself when you're acting as a facilitator and have a facilitator hat, and when you have a team member hat and can bring some input to the meeting. And now let's talk, I set the frame, I talked about what is PBR's meeting and what is facilitation in general, and how we can facilitate and what techniques we can use for facilitating PBRs, and how we can organize this flow of the meeting to work it smooth and to bring us value as a team. First of all, it is good to have some agenda for your PBR meeting, because sometimes I come to the meeting as Agile coach, and I see some people sitting there and they say, hey, I'm Agile coach, I'm going to participate in your meeting. What will this meeting will be about? And people are telling me, well, we're not sure. Probably it's about requirements that we're going to have next sprint. But let's wait for our business analyst. Let's wait for our product owner to come. So when you're creating the agenda, you can enumerate here the requirements your team is going to explore during PBR meeting. And in case product owner or business analyst is busy or with some calls, or maybe forget about this meeting, or maybe have something else to do, your team is able to explore it. Because it is team responsibility to be ready for sprint. They don't need to wait for somebody to come and to push them into this activity. But in order they were prepared, you can prepare the facilitator of the meeting, if you're a product owner, Scrum Master, some agenda, what requirements we are going to discuss, who we need for this meeting, what questions we have from previous PBRs. Because if you have several PBRs, on one PBR you asked questions your product owner, and product owner go to your stakeholders, to business users, asking them these questions, and you're expecting as a team that this person will come to you back to a next PBR and provide answers. So you should make sure that he or she have these answers, because otherwise probably you don't need this meeting if questions are not answered. You need required participants on the meeting. Again, maybe you discussing some requirements that are not only your team requirements, but also connected to some system that you are going to integrate to. Probably you need this third-party team to participate in your meeting as well, because otherwise you can create something that is not integratable to something else. So you should make sure as a facilitator, again, as a product owner, Scrum Master, as a team member, to make sure that, guys, come here. We have lots of chairs over there. So just make sure you have necessary people on this meeting. What also we do in our cases, sometimes we have like one product backlog and many teams working on this product backlog. Like who of you have the same situation, like one product and several teams? Okay, just some of you have these. And in this case, we have product backlog refinement meetings for a number of teams and planning meetings for separate teams. Because you all work on one product backlog, but you need to create separate meetings for sprint backlog creation. So for product backlog, we invite everybody, like 3 or 4 teams, to participate in to explore requirements. And on planning meetings, we will be only in our team, the team who will be creating sprint backlog. So also make sure about who you need for this meeting. About time boxing, actually, I think that most of you knows what is it. So you have just time box of 2 hours for a PBR meeting, or you have just 1 hour, and sometimes I see the following situation, like Scrum Master is facilitating a meeting, and meeting is near its end, and Scrum Master says, hey guys, it's just 5 minutes left, and we have 5 user stories left. We actually discussed only 1 user story for 1 hour. So what are we going to do next? It's not about facilitation. So you should facilitate and time box each user story in this case. For instance, you should locate like 10 minutes for each user story, 15 minutes for each user story. And all the time, you should make the team noticeable and aware how much time do they left, how much stories are left to discuss, and what time do they have. For instance, we're already discussing one of the story for 15 minutes, and you can say, guys, we have 10 more user stories to discuss, and we're stuck with this user story. What we're going to do? Again, you bring this responsibility to the team. You're asking them, what are we going to do? We have just half an hour left, 10 stories. We need more meetings. Should we prolong this meeting? Actually, it's not a good practice to prolong meetings because your team should be able to identify which time and how much time they need for each meeting. So when you do time boxing, don't time box at the end. Time box during the meeting. Just the main idea of time boxing. Also make sure that requirements, that environment is prepared. It's just preparation for the meeting stage, now what I'm talking about. It's not like conducting of the meeting, but preparation. So make sure the environment is ready. Because sometimes I see like 10 people come to the meeting and they sit up in WebEx, webcams for 10 minutes. 10 people multiplied on 10 minutes, 100 minutes is wasted. So just make sure if you're facilitating, just you have everything in the room. And when you start in the meeting, we're going to the start of the meeting here, you can use some warm-up techniques. So actually, it is facilitation techniques. Who of you is using some icebreakers or warm-ups for meetings? So there are some people. Why do you think we need this? Why it is good to start the meetings with warm-ups? To be more humor?
Because people are more likely to talk if they've already talked.
Yeah. They become really warmed up and they can be more engaged, more open. Sometimes we use like techniques, thank you, you just say thank you to anybody in the room to whom you feel thank you for the previous week or for the previous sprint. It's very easy. You can also use like tribes technique. Who of you know this technique, tribes? It's also very easy. You just, for instance, stay in the middle of the room and say, hey, during the weekend, for instance, we have a PBR on Monday. During the weekend, I was doing snowboarding. Who else has been doing snowboarding? And everybody who did snowboarding out of the team members come to this person and give high five to the person. Like my tribe, my team members. So you can also say, during the weekend, I was staying with my family. Who of you are staying with your family and doing nothing? So again, give me high five. So just there are lots of warm-up techniques. You can use different of them just to make people more active. And when you come itself to product backlog refinements sessions, after the warm-up, the people are more talkative now, you can start doing use different facilitation techniques and you can start talk actually about product backlog items. And I suggest to you this technique for product backlog items prioritization. It's quite easy to do. You here try to focus on product backlog items that brings you value, business value, comparing to some difficulty of implementation. You don't use as a matrix itself actually. Here is like leading lines, just leading lines, horizontal and vertical one. And you can move it depending on where you would like to have focus. For instance, we would like to have focus only on items that brings us really lots of business value. So we can move it even here, like leading line. And focus on this square. Here you see items, but again, you definitely need product owner in your team to be with you because product owner is the person who knows business value, right? So you can focus on this square and see, here we have user stories, here we have features that brings us lots of business value and quite easy to implement. So here is easy, and here there are items that are difficult to implement. So these items are easy to implement, and we're focusing on this square, and probably we will take these user stories for further investigation, and finally we will take it into our sprint, okay? And after this, we can focus on user stories that actually also gives us some value, but they are very long or very difficult to implement. We can focus on this square and think about what we can do with this story, how we can break it down in order it go to this square. So probably this story should be broken down to take less difficulty to implement and come to this square. And we can think also about these features in this square because they're very easy to implement, but they don't bring lots of value. So we need also to think how to move these to this square. And probably we should stay aware of these features because no lots of business value and lots of time, lots of effort to implement. It depends, probably you need to analyze this square as well, but for the previous sprint you can focus on these, and these squares you can analyze for upcoming sprints. One more model that can help you to do prioritization is KANO Model. Who of you familiar with this one? Okay. So you can focus here on the features. You can actually focus on all these 3 levels. But the first level is the features that if you don't implement it, your client will be very much dissatisfied. But if you implement these features, your client will be like, okay, neutral. For instance, if login is not working in your application, your client is really dissatisfied. But if you create login in your application, your client is neutral. It's your responsibility. For instance, if your application is mostly about report functionality, so reporting functionality must be present. So your client will be very much dissatisfied if reporting is not working. Here line is about performance. For instance, you have reporting functionality in your application, but reports work slowly and the client is dissatisfied. But if you improve the performance of reports functionality, your client will become a bit more happier. The more faster reports are working, the more happy is your client. So it's about performance. As for excitement, for instance, you need this reporting functionality in your application. Reports are working pretty well, but also you find out the way how to visualize the data of these reports. And it can make your client really happy because he or she don't need to look through all these numbers, but just have some charts, some diagrams. And it makes this person really excited about this. So if you don't create this visualizing functionality, the client will be neutral because he's fine that you have this data in digital, in digits. But if you make it, your client can become happy. One more example, not from like IT area, but from our common life. At first, when Wi-Fi appears in cafes, it was a real wow. Because for cafes, we come to eat food, actually, not to use internet. So when cafes were supplying us with Wi-Fi, we become really very happy about it. But the main idea of cafes is to give us food. So if there is no Wi-Fi in cafe, we was more or less fine. Now we are expecting that each cafe has Wi-Fi. So actually this excitement feature come over here. If there is no Wi-Fi in cafe, probably we feel that something is wrong with the cafe. How we're used to come to cafe and look through free Wi-Fi. But sometimes I see the cafes who is allowing us to stay free of Wi-Fi, and they even write just talk to your friends, don't go to internet. So actually it's also become like a new feature, new service. So features are moving around this diagram all the time. And when you work with your backlog, you should understand what will make your client excited, what will make him like neutral, and what will dissatisfy him a lot if you don't introduce this. When you prioritize your features, when you know what you're going to do in next sprint, you can go to product backlog, exploration, items. Who of you know World Coffee technique? So you can, if you have several teams working on the same backlog, you can group them in small groups. Like you can have like 4 groups of 3 people or four groups of 4 people in each. Ask them to discuss the requirements inside small groups, left some host in each group, and then ask other people to shift the groups, to move around different hosts, and describe the hosts that what they already investigated in their groups. So the host become also enriched with new information, and then the host describing the new count team, the information that he received from the previous teams. If you don't want to do this shifting of teams, if for instance you have small team like 8 people and you're discussing requirements, you can just separate them in small groups, because when people are in small groups, they actually must be active, because it's very easier to stay passive among 8 people. But where you work in a pair or in triad, it's difficult to stay passive and you need to contribute. So you can separate people in small groups and ask them to discuss some requirements in groups. What they have remembered about these requirements. Probably what can be the risks about these requirements implementation. What business can get if we implement these requirements late in time. So what can happen? We also use this technique. We actually invented it by ourselves, as we think it's called playback. We had the problem with the PBRs when on one PBR, business analyst or product owner described some requirements to the team. Then the next PBR appeared. Product owner came to this team with details of this requirement, and the team remembers nothing from the previous session. So she needs to repeat it once again. So what we did, on one PBR, first product owner is describing the team requirements, and on the second PBR, the team is repeating the requirements to product owner, how they understand it, what they remember. And only after this, the product owner starts to add in details to what they have remembered about this requirement. What else I can suggest for better understanding of the requirements by the team? That product owner can have like checklist to check the understanding of requirements. Because sometimes product owner asking the team, guys, do you understand what was this requirement about? Is it clear to you? And they're just keeping silent or just saying, yeah, more or less. It's familiar situation. So in this case, product owner can provide questions to the team to check how exactly they understand the requirements. So it should be like some business cases probably. It should be something about the requirement that product owner knows, but he would like or she would like to check how the team understands. So product owner can have her or his own checklist. And after this, when you do this checklisting once again, the team will know what questions you're going to ask him or to ask them, and they will start doing it by themselves because they will be waiting that you will start asking them. So it also learns the team to stay involved during PBR meeting. We are going to estimation process, and sometimes you can do it during PBR meetings, sometimes you can do it during planning meeting. It's up to you. We sometimes do it during PBR meeting. Who of you is familiar with planning poker? Okay, why we use planning poker? Huh? We don't. Okay, the ones who's using. Why are you using these? To start discussion, to estimate, to share the knowledge. Actually, it can be. Yes, because when you need to provide some number, and you were not stayed involved during the whole meeting, how you're going to estimate it? You should either have very good mind reading skills of your product owner, to read the mind of product owner, or you should be involved during the whole discussion, because if all the team shows that this user story will take us like 5 user stories, 5 story points to implement, and you all of a sudden shows 13 or 20 just because you were not stay attentive during the meeting, you will be asked, okay, you have 5 story points and you 13, why it is so? So I really recommend you to use planning poker, not in vocal form, like when we're saying, but in real planning poker when you need to show it with numbers and first to hide it. Because when everybody is just speaking, they influence to one another. You can also use bulk estimation or affinity line estimation for high-level requirements estimation. If you have lots of items, you can ask people to sort it out in a line from the smallest, from the minimum effort to the maximum effort. So people can do this line in certain rounds. And the main idea of affinity line is when a team member is sorting the requirements out in this, he's focusing on the two items that are really very close to this requirement. So when I'm looking at the affinity line, I'm not focusing on the whole line, but only on 3 items. or only in 2 items in this case, and move it. If I think that this requirement is smaller than this requirement, that is fine, I will stay it as is. But if I think this requirement is larger than this item, I will shift it and create such line. After this, I can say that, for instance, large items are coming to X box, bigger items are coming to L, smaller are coming to S, something is coming to M. Tiny items are coming to XS. What I can do next if I have lots of requirements? I can do bulk estimation. Who of you is familiar with this technique? I can have some requirements, just one requirement from the middle, and discuss it with the team in details, and ask the team to estimate these requirements using planning poker, just one requirement. And the team can say to me, okay, this requirement, it seems to be like 8 story points. And after this, I say that all requirements here are of 8 story points. It will mean that these requirements here that are smaller is about 5 and, for instance, 3 story points. And requirements here are about 13 and 20 story points. And in such a way, we can do very quickly, very large scope estimation. But please don't tell your management that it is project plan. Because we made this mistake once again. It was communicated to client, and we have lots of problems afterwards. So it's very high level estimation. Also, I recommend you to use capacity and velocity metrics. Capacity is ideal hours available for the upcoming sprint, and velocity is how much story points you made in the previous sprints. You need these items to have the right sprint size to meet what user stories you have, comparing to what time or what story points you usually implement. And also you can use checklists like definition of done, definition of ready. You use definition of ready to check the readiness of your requirements. These checklists describe what you mean by ready. Should requirements have acceptance criteria? Should it have mock-ups? Maybe some specification by example. So what is about requirements that you would like to have for your PBRs? Your product owner should know this checklist. And I have a question to you. Why should you use definition of done at the PBR meeting? Definition of done usually used on review meetings to check whether your requirements are done or not done. So why you can use it and why you need actually to use it on PBR meeting, definition of done. Because if you start investigating your requirements, start estimating your requirements, and you're not sure what meant by done, how you will be able to provide it in time and within the whole scope at the end. When you check in requirements only at the end to the definition of done, and something is not done, you can do nothing because it's end of the sprint. So you should do it at the beginning to understand which we have missed. Maybe we have missed unit test coverage here, and we need also to include some time for this. So these both lists are important to use on PBR. I also encourage people to write meetings of the meeting, because sometimes some team members are not present at the meeting for some reason, and some questions should be addressed to someone and can be lost. So use meeting of the meeting to analyze what PBR items were finalized, what questions you have. I usually suggest the following format. If you have some action items during PBR, you can write the following: what to do, who should do this, by what time this person should do this, and how you're going to check that it is done. Like 4-column format for creating minutes of the meeting. But you can also include there the information about the requirements discussed, the details missed, maybe some updates necessary in Jira, and what assumptions we had to base on our estimations. It's also important because sometimes developers say, okay, it can be like 3 story points or it can be 2 story points. And you ask your developer, could you please explain in what case it is 3 story point, or in what case it is 2 or 5 or 13 story points. And you can also include these assumptions to your minutes of the meeting. I also recommend you to check and to do some follow-up actions. For instance, if your product owner and your Scrum Master, and if your product owner told you that she will or he will answer your questions, by the next PBR. So it is probably not a good idea to come to this PBR and ask your product owner on the PBR, are you going to answer our questions? It's better to come to this person a bit earlier in the week and ask, are you going to answer our questions? Because probably we will not be able to do our PBR if the questions are not answered. So the idea here is to check the commitments not on the day of commitment, but a bit earlier in time. I recommend you to watch and to read something about facilitation. If you like, there is a great book on facilitation, Facilitator's Guide for Participatory Decision Making by Sam Kana. It's like grandfather of facilitation. There is a good site on Retros Facilitation, and also I have lots of information on facilitation in my LinkedIn. So there are like tons of posts, tons of webinars on different facilitation techniques and various facilitation topics. I also invite you, if you like, to participate in my other webinars on coaching, on estimation in function points, and if you like, also request the training on facilitation. I will be glad to see you there. Do we have any time for questions? Okay, so questions about what I have discussed, or maybe I haven't discussed. Any comments? Okay. Do we have additional microphone? Okay, let's do it in the following way.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Jakub. You mentioned that you do the review when you the refinement meeting when you have many teams with many teams. Do you include all members of the teams? Because it was hot topic in our company.
We tried to use it with all, like 40 team members, and we have rooms for these, and it was very tough. So we decided to use like technical leads, product owner, and business analysts. And after this, we call it like main PBR. And after this, we use it like local PBRs when only business analysts and technical leads are presenting. But what we also noticed that sometimes technical leads becomes like very dominative on these meetings because they are like owners of one right answer because they were on these main PBR. So we start adding to technical leads some senior developers, and we're rotating them. So everybody has a chance to, like most of the team have a chance at least once to participate in main PBR. Thank you. Any other questions?
How do you manage meeting overhead? There's too many meetings.
Okay. So yeah, sometimes developers are complaining that we have too many meetings and we need to participate. Okay, but you can try to stop these meetings, and then they will have the problems with the requirements. They will not understand what to do. They will need to read long JIRAs, and probably they will be unhappy. So, and you can ask them, how much time can you spend on requirements refactoring actually in order to not to have these problems during this sprint? So, if we don't do something, we're canceling it and experimenting and seeing what's going on then. How much time, for instance, for PBRs we need? Is it 2 times a week for 1 hour or 2 times a week for 2 hours? So experiments. More questions? So thank you for coming.